Lunchtime Live with Andrea Gilligan on Newstalk.
I mentioned at the start of the programme today that the World Health Organization estimate there's about 1 in 6 couples worldwide that experience fertility difficulties, and it is Fertility Awareness Week, so we wanted to talk about the issues associated with that and whether or not there's stigma around talking about fertility issues as well. Sorcha's with us on the line today. What's your experience, Sorcha, your story?
Hi there. So I actually work in a fertility clinic and spend a lot of my time around people who are going through this struggle. You see every day, every walks of life coming through the doors, and it sort of got me thinking about my own fertility as a young woman. I was 28 at the time, and I decided to take a blood test that kind of can check your fertility levels. It gives you an indication anyways. It's called checking your AMH. And kind of a gut instinct told me that there wasn't going to be good, and your gut is never wrong, as they say. So mine was well below the range for a person of my age. Total blow, really. You kind of go through every emotion in the book there. It's totally unexpected, and it's not really something that you talk about. You chat with your friends, and you're like, oh, maybe in a few years when you meet the right person, that kind of thing. But yeah, it was a bit of a shock. So I decided to do something about it if I could. I met with a doctor and kind of went through all my options. And, he spoke to me as if I was his sister, which I totally appreciated, and recommended doing an egg freezing cycle to try and preserve some eggs and that sort of thing, which, I ended up doing, which was an experience. It's a total roller coaster. You go through everything when you're going through it.
Why did you have the gut feeling, Sorcha, that you thought your AMH levels would be low?
I just I was kind of like, as I was going through work, and the first thing that I always look at with patients is you tend to lean towards looking at their date of birth. And I was seeing date of births that were people that were younger than me, and they were at a stage where they already knew that they had an issue. They had been trying and to naturally conceive, and they were here for, IVF. And I had a feeling. I can't really put my finger on it, to be honest. I just had a feeling. And I think, it's not talked about enough of people in my age group. It really, really isn't. Fertility is just pushed to the back a little bit. And since I've obviously told all my friends to go and get checked, just from experience.
So for you, it was about the egg freezing cycle. It was the assurance, basically, that there were options for you in the long term. That's what...
Exactly. There's no guarantees in life. We all do know that. But to be able to give myself an option in the future, that was, to me, a totally empowering experience.
That's why you went down that route.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think we talk, like you mentioned that since that you've started to chat to your own friends, your own friend group about it, and around fertility issues. Why don't we talk about it more here? Like, is that a uniquely Irish thing not to talk about it, or is there stigma?
Potentially. I do think there's, a lot of privacy people keep with family planning. It's none of someone's business, and, all the taboos around that sort of thing. And particularly, for women, I find, we talk about everything under the sun, but for some reason, fertility isn't one of those topics that I've come across that we speak about a lot. I think there's a bit of maybe sort of like a shame associated with it. Like, you feel like your body betrays you when it doesn't work the way it's meant to.
Tell me a little bit, Sorcha, about going through the egg freezing cycle, the actual process of that.
Yeah, it's, me totally naively, before I even knew anything about fertility, I just thought you could go in on any random day and they'd be able to take some eggs out and that was you done. Unfortunately, that is not the case. There's a whole process to it. There's lots of blood, lots of ultrasounds, lots of medications. It's quite overwhelming to begin with. But everyone is so kind throughout the entire process. Like, they just they kind of hold your hand. They give you step-by-step support. So it sort of initially starts with your blood test. You kind of get an idea of where you're at. You might do a first scan to see if there's, follicles on your ovaries and that sort of thing. And then the doctor kind of comes up with a treatment plan that's for you, that thinks that will give you the maximum amount of eggs that they can retrieve. And it's about 2 weeks or so of stimulation medication. So that can be injections, that can be pills, that sort of thing. And while you're doing that, you're monitored extremely closely of how things are, happening down there. And then you eventually get to a point where everything is ready to go and you have a procedure to retrieve the eggs, and then they are frozen down in the lab by the embryologist.
Yeah.
But of course, it's never as straightforward. There's always roller coaster. Blood mightn't behave. You mightn't respond the way doctors anticipate. Everyone's body is so different. One might work for one person and might not work for another. And there's still a lot of unknowns in it, I suppose.
Lunchtime live at newstalk.com is the email address if you want to share your story with us. There's a few emails in, and I do want to try and get to some of them as well. Nicola's joining us too, Sorcha. Nicola's also on the line. What's your story around fertility issues, Nicola?
Mine would be probably much the same. I had a feeling there was something, a couple of years ago when myself and my partner were talking about kids and, thinking about it. And I suffer from PCOS as well, so it's hard to track when I was ovulating. So we went to the GP to get bloods done. And then from there, really, it was like, nothing to be too concerned about, but, if there is something that you think about trying, they recommended to go to a fertility specialist. And we did straight away just to see, what would come out, what was ahead of us really. So we went straight to a fertility specialist, and then we both got tests done. And then unfortunately it came back that we both had problems on each side. So IVF was our only option. And again, probably like Sorcha, I went in a bit naive thinking, this is pretty straightforward. I didn't know the length of the process it will take and the different medications and injections, because I'll be starting off with the egg freezing. So, I think it was just a lot to take in at the time back then. I didn't know. I just had a feeling there was something up. I didn't know because I didn't have regular periods, and I was like, if we do want to have kids, probably sooner rather than later we better get tested. So we're just so glad I did when we did, because it took us some time before I felt pregnant. So
it was a success though.
Yes, I've 2 kids now. Yes, it was. After a couple of years, I had 3 pregnancies. Unfortunately, one resulted in a miscarriage, but I've a daughter and a 3-year-old son now. So it does work after many tries. And I think, like what Sorcha said, like every round I did was different. My body responded different dosages, and obviously the consultants learned, from every cycle with everyone of how different bodies respond to different things and what's the best way and outcome is for each patient. So, so obviously we got the result in the end, which was great.
Do you think there's stigma around chatting about fertility issues, Nicola?
Oh, 100%. I think, pre-COVID when we went into the reception area and there's couples there and, and single people as well going through the process, no one, it's like people have their head down and afraid to talk about it. We didn't know anyone going through it. Only me, telling close friends. They had a friend of a friend that might have done it. And I think even a couple of years on now, it's coming to come out a little bit more, I think. But I don't know. I think people are embarrassed to talk about it. I know we were at the start, but even the lingo that's used in fertility and different things, we were Googling everything and trying to look on forums, and it's just, people just don't want to talk about it, or they just feel embarrassed, I think. I know we certainly did at the start. We didn't really tell anyone that we were going through it. But now we're quite open about it and want to help anyone else that's gone through the same journey as well.
Well, that's the thing. And by all accounts, I mean, we all know somebody, more probably often than not, it's more than one person that's experiencing fertility difficulties. But when we hear the World Health Organization figures and their estimates today that it's about 1 in 6 couples worldwide. Graham Cool is the scientific director for SIMS IVF. Graham is with us on the line. Graham, why is there so much stigma around talking about infertility?
I think either. I think it's just it's a very private, personal matter, and I think I don't know the stigma, but I think people are just reserved about speaking about these things. I think what happens is people also don't realise how many people are going through the same thing as they are, and as you mentioned, the 1 in 6 couples suffer infertility issues, and as people enter into the treatment and they realise there's other people who are experiencing the same thing as them, they do become a bit more open about it, and they do start talking about it more with their friends. But I still think it's just one of these things which it's very private to begin with, and people are embarrassed, and people also they feel they're letting themselves down, they're letting their partner down, and it's just one of these things that they keep together between themselves.
I know for a lot of people, Graham, it's nearly and this sounds so ridiculous to say this, and I don't know if Sorcha and Nicola, felt this way at all, but nearly sometimes the deterrent about going to talk about AMH levels or get blood tests done or any discussion around egg freezing is that there's the fear of it not being a success and having actually to deal with that news, which I know sounds so ridiculous, but...
Yep, I'd agree. And I mean, look, the thing that we're trying to do with our 1 in 6 campaign here in Sims is just to raise awareness, let people know that having the information, being informed, lets you make decisions about your future fertility. You may decide not to do anything. You may just decide, and hopefully, if you do some testing, things are it's fine. And for the vast majority of people, that would be the case. But for those where the test results come back and there's for the males perhaps an issue with the semen, the sperm, for the females there's a problem with the AMH or ovulation. At least then there's something you can do about it. You can be forewarned as forearmed. So it's better to have that information and find out earlier and as soon as possible, because then you can do something about it. And it's far better to freeze your eggs if that's a solution for you, as soon as possible, as young as you can be. Egg quality decreases with female age, so it's better to get those eggs frozen earlier in your 20s or early 30s than in your late 30s or 40s, because they're going to give you a far better chance of that success that you are looking for. But unfortunately, there aren't any guarantees. We wish in working in fertility that there were, that we could give absolutes, but unfortunately there aren't. So look, it is something that we do our best, but some people there are going to be issues, and we'll do our best to help them, but it doesn't work for everybody, I'm afraid.
Sorcha, having gone through the process now, do you, is it something you and chat to your own friend group about or encourage them to look at?
Yeah, for sure. As Graham was saying there, the whole point of the 1 in 6 campaign is for, educational purposes and to get people talking. And for me, that was a huge part of why I wanted to share my story, was because I felt, at 28, this wasn't discussed amongst 28-year-olds, and maybe we are the kind of area that we could be doing something about it. We're the right age to be doing something about it, as to give ourselves an option or a chance at success. So I think it is something that the younger the better. The more knowledge you have, the more power you have. Yeah.
What about you, Nicola? Is it a frequent topic of conversation among your own group?
I think now, yeah, I mean, definitely the last couple of years I've been very open to my friends. I think they were very interested, and, talking to them about what was involved, and, they've then come back since in the last couple of years have reached out. Do you mind if I give them your number? I was like, absolutely not. Same on Anthony, my partner's side. In work and his friends, the different people that have reached out to me, and I give my number out to talk about, because no one knew anything about it, whereas I would have loved that probably at the start when I went through the process. So definitely I think the campaign is great to create awareness and get people talking about it again and more openly. It definitely helps.
Is the starting point, Graham, for this, it's the AMH blood test, and then you're looking at the egg freezing route?
Not necessarily. I mean, the AMH test is probably the simplest and most straightforward thing to start off with. It's a simple blood test. It can be done at any time in the cycle, so it can be done in any day of the week. And it gives you an idea of the ovarian reserve. And what that means is how many eggs you're likely to have. And there's a kind of a profile of kind of what per age group of a female, how many kind of eggs you should have and what your AMH should be. So it lets you know whether you're, above average, below average, or in that curve that where you want to be. And it's when it's low, that's when, other options are potentially need to be talked about. But again, it's not an indicator of egg quality, it's an indicator of egg number. So the reason to freeze eggs then is to give yourself a bit of an insurance policy. Freeze them when you're younger, just in case you need them. The vast majority of eggs that are frozen are never actually thawed out. Probably in the States, where they've been doing this longer than anywhere else, probably only about 20 to 30% of the eggs that are ever frozen are ever thawed. So women don't necessarily need to use these eggs, it's just a bit of an insurance policy. But freezing eggs might not be the right option for you. As part of the testing packages that we offer, they include a consultation with one of our fertility specialists, and they would discuss that individually with each patient as to what the best option is for them.
There's quite a few emails in, but there's one I just was quite interested in here this afternoon, and just bear with me for a moment because I do just want to read this out. This listener says, over the last couple of years there's been a vast increase in the discussions around IVF, which is fantastic, but from my perspective a lot of these conversations are about the process itself, the cost both financially and emotionally, and options for when it doesn't go to plan. When I personally was going through ICSI, I trawled any groups, articles, podcasts I could find with regards to our own situation. A lot of the spokespeople were ladies who went through the arduous process but ultimately ended up with a baby, whether that be through donor eggs or not. Very little is discussed though about couples where IVF doesn't work, who were told that their only option is donor but don't want to go down this route. This was us. After many years of trying to conceive, going to 4 clinics, 2 specialist research hospitals overseas, we ended up being told donor was our only route. We decided not to go down this path, and for us it ended up being the best decision that we could make. My life was on hold for more than 4 years, and now looking back I was suffering with both depression and anxiety throughout it all. But now at the other side we're so happy. We've a lovely life. It's a different life than I ever envisaged in my 20s, but it's fantastic, and to be honest I wouldn't change it for anything. I just want other ladies to know that life doesn't end if they get the same news that we did. There's lots of roads for people, and believe me, you can get and you can also have a very happy, fulfilled, adventurous, calm and love-filled life. You will not be any lesser. That's an important point, Graham, as well, because, I know we're talking to Nicole and Sorcha today, but everybody's journey might be the same journey, but it's not always the same destination.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, what we strive to do is obviously we hope that everybody ends up with the outcome that they want, which is a healthy baby. But what we want to do is make sure that the patients where that isn't what happens, for the patients that don't reach that point, or where they don't go for donor, like the person who emailed in there, that they can look back and go, we've done what was right for us. We've been supported by the clinic throughout that journey, and we're ready to move on to the next phase of our lives. And sometimes that is without that success and without that baby there. But what we're hoping to do is help patients who make that decision to move on, to let them feel that they have done the best that they can, and that's okay, that they're right to move on to the next phase of their lives, and that's potentially.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely, it's a point definitely worth making, no doubt about it, and it's not the only email in that vein either. Listen, Graham Cool, Scientific Director for Sims IVF, Sorcha and Nicole as well, thanks a million to you both for sharing your story. LunchtimeLive@newstalk.com is the email address.
Lunchtime Live with Andrea Gilligan. Weekdays at midday on Newstalk.
You know the message. Like a bat signal, but amongst pals. 'Cause the sun's sort of out and someone just planted a seed in the group chat. 3 letters and 1 question mark. Pub? It's a lovely day for a Guinness. Please enjoy responsibly. Drinkaware.co.uk for the facts. Be drink aware. Visit drinkaware.ie.